As you guys have all been asking for it, and as I've got a fair few turbos I can show you, I'm going to do a quick StavTech video on some interesting turbos that I've got kicking around, which hopefully you'll like and maybe learn something from it. This is a Holset HE400 VG, which is basically a sort of brand new top spec Holset variable geometry turbo. The HE400 means it's about HX40 size. This has actually got a slightly smaller turbine wheel than a typical HX40 and a slightly bigger compressor wheel, but it's a proper trick bit of kit. You got the turbo speed sensor as standard. It's got a compressor inlet temp sensor there, which it would use in conjunction with a compressor outlet temp sensor to work out the compressor efficiency, as in the difference in heat between the air coming in and the air temp coming out, which it would use in conjunction with the VGT and whatever to adjust the boost and so on to keep compressor efficiency as high as possible. Unfortunately, this one has got a damaged compressor wheel blade, which I will show you now by taking off the housing. I've removed the V-bands already to make it easier to show you, but they're only simple bolted V-band clamps with 11mm bolt on them, so they're dead easy to take off. But yeah, look, it's billet wheel, but it's got a chip out of it. Somebody's obviously hit it with something. It's actually a brand new turbo, but it needs a new wheel. The compressor wheel induces 62mm on this, which is bigger than any HX40 one I know of. Their biggest is like 60 normally, and that's what they generally call like a HX40 Super. But this is 62mm, so it's probably good for maybe 750 brake or something. It will flow a lot because the 60mm is known to flow 70 pounds a minute, which is 700 brake on a petrol engine. This is also, if you notice, very curved blades, unlike 99% of turbos which have got straight compressor blades. Again, that's a new Holset design you see on some of their brand new turbos. Supposedly flows better and more efficient. If you see modern jet engine turbine blades, they have become very curved like this, turbofan blades and so on, compared to older styles which are straighter than this. This is far more curved than anything you'd normally see. This is the electronic VGT controller. It is controlled by the ECU as standard, although all it does is move an arm under here, and you can actually remove all of this and move the arm with a normal wastegate actuator if you wished. But to be honest, these days you can get small aftermarket ECUs that can control just the VGT on its own, so a lot of people like to keep this and buy one of those controllers, although obviously that's a lot more money than just converting it to an actuator. This is the Holset VGT setup. It looks similar to most other VGT setups on Garrett's and so on, but they have got these blades that move sort of open and closed to change the spool characteristics. But on these, it's not that at all. I cannot show you because I'll have to unbolt this and move the arm up and down to show you. But this entire section moves up and down, effectively making the turbine housing bigger and smaller. So you've got, when it's closed, it's like having a much smaller AR housing, very small at fully closed. And when fully open like this, it's the massive housing you see here, which is 25 centimeters, which is an AR of something well over sort of 1.1, 1.2. Again, look, very small turbine wheel compared to the compressor wheel. This is only slightly bigger than a HX35 one and much smaller than a typical HX40 one. I think it might also be 11 blade, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, it's also 11 blade, which is a different design to the normal Holset wheels, which are 12 blade, and they've also got a different curvature to each blade as well compared to the older ones, which again makes more flow and less back pressure for any given wheel size, which is basically a win-win in every way, because it keeps the spool as fast as it ever would be for that size wheel, but flows more. That is the housing, and you can just see where these tips, basically as the housing is open to make it smaller, go into that and retract when it's an open housing bit. Very simple, one moving part, unlike a Garrett where each of those vanes move, and that's why the VGT turbos are known for being fragile, because there's a lot of moving parts on the Garretts to split and melt and stick and so on. Whereas Holsets is basically one solid piece, and they are very, very reliable even with extreme heat and huge miles, which is why they're often used on petrol turbo cars as well. Last thing to show you is the absolutely huge size of the anti-surge slot on this, which is that there. I've never seen one that big before. That's at least twice as wide as any other I've ever seen. Normally they're a couple of millimeters. This one is, I think it measured to be 6 or 7 mil when I measured it with the digital calipers. They've got it that wide. They obviously expect this turbo to spool up so ridiculously fast that it would normally suffer with really terrible compressor surge, so they've had to make a really wide slot to prevent surge, which is good because it means this thing must spool up like an absolute rocket considering it's a massive turbo. But again, with the damaged compressor wheel, I can't find out myself, but I'm going to sell this one actually, so I'm not going to find out myself, but there's going to be one lucky customer, that's for sure. Right then, on to the next turbo. Right, this next thing I'm going to talk about is Holset HE35 turbine housings. They look identical from here. Same part number, 3532214 on both, which is the Holset part number for 12cm T3 wastegated housings. But weirdly, there is a difference, and I'll show you. From the back, this one is a typical HX35, which has got a small internal wastegate, nothing much, enough to cause boost creep on most engines because it's small, on petrol engines anyway, because they're intended for diesels, so they don't need much wastegate, which is why most people just weld that shut and run the external wastegate on HX35s. This one, however, is a rare as hell one made for a compressed natural gas engine, kind of like LPG, so spark ignition, so it needs much more wastegate like a normal petrol engine car, and because of that the wastegate hole is literally twice as big. I can't remember the exact size, but that is enormous. That's verging on what a smaller external wastegate would be from a flow point of view, maybe better. But it's actually exactly the same part number, so you'd never know unless you took the back plate off and saw or knew it was from a gas version. But either way, this is very rare and very cool, because it means you could get away probably with running internal wastegate on your HX35 on a petrol engine with no boost creep. Next thing I'll show you, and I will keep that housing out because it's useful for this, is this other turbo which I've got, which again has got a damaged compressor wheel blade but is actually unused, and it's a Holset HE300, which is a HX35 really, their most modern version, almost the same. Most parts are interchangeable with a normal HX35, but is slightly different in a few ways. It's got a billet compressor wheel, slightly longer inlet, which don't really make any difference, but it exists. The core is identical, as is all the fitment. Turbine wheel size is identical to a HX35 normal one, but the difference is the design is different. This is same inducer and exducer diameter, but it's 11 blade rather than 12, with a much steeper blade angle. So the spool is the same, or possibly better, but the flow and back pressure is actually lower than the typical 12 blade one, which is good. This is probably the only one I've ever seen in real life yet, so it's a proper quite sought after bit of kit and would fit any other HX35. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. Here's a normal 12 blade HX35 compressor turbine wheel as a comparison. Same sizes, just one less blade, and if you look at it side on, you can see the difference in pitch of the blades as well, with the new 11 blade version actually much tighter angle. Very, very rare, very cool, and probably perfect for somebody who's wanting to push a HX35 really hard. And yeah, it does fit exactly the same. That is the normal HX35 turbine wheel. That is the HE300 turbine wheel. Exactly the same, fits in a normal HX35 housing, but is just better. Next up, something that don't look very interesting on the face of it, a standard Volvo 5-cylinder Mitsubishi TD04HL turbo. But there is a few interesting things about these, mostly, which I did a StavTech website feature about this, is the turbine housings of any TD04HL fits direct to any Holset HE221 turbo. They are basically exactly the same fitment, same wheel size, everything. So anything a TD04HL can be fitted to, so these Volvos and so on, you can literally swap the housings over and make a Holset HE221 be a direct fit to any of these engines, which is good because obviously OEM fitment's a bit strange with funny flanges on the inlets and outlets of these turbos. So things like the 5-cylinder Volvos, some Subarus, the Mitsubishi Lancer, Rally Art, quite a few Saabs. So yeah, you can fit Holset HE221s straight to these very simply. Another thing you might not realise is these Volvo flanges, while it's some weird shape, is actually just T3. This is a T3 flange, and it is, you'll have to take my word for it because you can't see it very easily, but exactly the same. All you probably want to do is machine off this lip to make it a normal flat flange, and it will fit any normal T3 flange. Regarding what I said about it fitting a Holset HE221 turbine onto a TD04HL, it's all interchangeable either way round. This is a spare Holset HE221 turbine housing which I've got kicking around, and I'll just quickly swap them over to show you. Basically they're just a single V-band with a 10mm bolt, so dead easy. Take the clamp off, might need a bit of a wiggle and a whack. Yeah, this is the housing, comes off like that. That is basically what it looks like. And yes, if you get it's a Holset HE221 TD04HL, goes straight together, and as you can maybe see, hopefully if the light's good enough, the wheel is exactly the same size, TD04HL and Holset HE221. The only difference is the HE221 wheel flows more than the TD04HL. So basically you could fit a complete HE221 to your original TD04HL housing, and you've got a turbo with a higher flowing turbine, higher flowing compressor. I mean, the 221s are good for 380 brake at a push, and it would fit to your standard OEM TD04HL housing, which would make fitment dead easy. I'm actually doing this on my Compressor, so I can use a standard exhaust manifold, standard fitment, but have a really good Holset HE221 fitted to it rather than some crappy hybrid or some standard Subaru IHI like they've normally got fitted at that sort of power level. And I'm only going for a 350, but for that it's absolutely perfect. So yeah, now you know and now you can see. Last but not least, a bit of myth busting. I'm sure you've seen on pretty much any write-up on cars with sequential twin turbos, which are pretty rare. You're talking Mark IV Supra, Legacy twin turbo, FDRX7 and Porsche 959. I actually can't think of any more off the top of my head. They nearly always say that the initial turbo that kicks in is the small turbo, and then a bigger turbo kicks in later on for big power. But that's just not the case. Then pretty much always two identical turbos, and one just comes on at lower revs, and the second one, a valve or six depending on how it's set up, opens up at higher revs to allow the second one to come on. On diesel twin turbos, they're compounded, so it is two different size turbos. You'll have the little one that spools up instantly, and then the bigger one to come on after, but that's compound turbos. On all petrol sequential twin turbos I've ever seen, it's the same size. I wasn't sure about the Legacy because I've never seen one before, but I picked up these the other day, which is a pair of Legacy twin turbos, and I've checked them, and I'll show you again now. But yeah, it's the same basic turbo. These are put together in the same way most IHI turbos are, which are a bit fiddly to take apart, so this could be good for anybody who's thinking of doing that. The compressor housings are held on with these star screws basically, and they're always jammed solid. They just won't, if you tried to use a screwdriver on them, they would just jam up. You'd end up knackering up the threads and you'd never get the things off. What you need to use is one of these, basically an impact driver, which is just a normal cheapy Clark one from Machine Mart, nothing special. And what you need to do is put one in, whack it with a hammer, and it jolts it out. Basically it jolts it loose, and then after that you can simply unscrew them. I've tried loads of IHIs over the years and I've never managed to get any undone without using something like this, and I've actually probably knackered a few by trying it without one of these. But this, you just a good load of wax with a hammer, and then it finally break loose without knackering any of these threads. So I'll take this apart and show you the turbos in pieces. Yeah, these Legacy twin turbos are IHI RHF4s, which are good for about 175, 180 brake a piece, which tallies up with what most people say are possible on a standard Legacy turbos, which is 350 brake for the pair of them. Yeah, on the face of it, they look almost the same, but with the housings off, which again, you have to be careful when you take the housings off. You don't want to hit them too hard at one angle or the other, because it will contact the housing with the blades, and you'll end up bending a compressor wheel blade just trying to take the housings off. But that's housings. They've just got sealant to keep the air from leaking. So no massive twisting in any direction, so you don't hit the bloody compressor wheel blades and bend them. But yeah, that is the housings and the turbos with it off. The blades, the wheel size, it looks the same, and the reason is they look the same because they're identical. I'm not going to measure them again now, but I can tell you the compressor inducer is 34mm on both, and the exducer is 52.5 on both, and you can see they're the same design. Literally the only reason one looks different is because this turbo is a bit blacker and dirtier on the compressor, and that's just because the standard oil breather system sucks into that turbo far more than that one. But yeah, they are identical compressor wheel sizes in every way, shape or form. So yeah, they're not bigger on that side. But what about the turbine side? Just like on the Holsets, it is just a clamp with a 10mm nut to hold them on, dead simple. And now with the housing clamp removed, I can show you the turbine side. Wiggle this one a bit to get it off. Again, on the face of it, they look absolutely identical, and the reason is they are exactly the same. There is no difference in the turbine wheel size or shape. Inducer and exducer are both identical. The actual sizes, I've measured them already and I'm not going to bother again, is about 45.5 on the inducer and 35 on the exducer, so on both they're exactly the same. And to be honest, even if you look at the cores, you wouldn't know which one is which. They are interchangeable, identical, they are just the same turbo. What about the housings though? And this is a funny one, because the turbine housings, they do look different. This has got a different flange to this one. Same size hole, inlet hole, just a different flange. Generally they look the same. This one physically looks very slightly bigger, not by much, literally almost nothing. And the reason is, it is very slightly bigger. This is a P16 housing, this is a P18 housing. And while that does seem like, oh, it's a bigger and smaller turbo, the difference between P18 and P16 in AR, which is a sort of a turbine housing number we all understand a bit better because it's what Garrett used. A 16 is a 0.63 AR roughly, and an 18 is a 0.71. And to be honest, 63 to 71 is nothing. You wouldn't notice that in spool or power or anything really. It is ineffectively the same turbo. Even a slightly different flow in exhaust or slightly different flow to any other part, which is always going to be likely on any engine unless things were made perfectly symmetrical, will make a much bigger difference than that slight change in housing size. You know, if it was 9 to 18, massive difference. One would spool far faster and make less power. But as they are pretty much identical twin turbos, and you could run them as symmetrical side by side, non-sequential twins with no problem, because they are pretty much the same bloody thing. And that is what happens beyond, you know, once the second turbo kicks in on a Legacy. That is how they operate, and it's not a problem for the car. If one turbo was far bigger than the other, one turbo would be fighting against the other all the time, and the engine would never run properly, it would never boost properly, it would be terrible. So that is pretty much why these sequential setups have to, with no other way about it, either be a compound setup, which no petrol ones are, or be pretty much the same turbo, otherwise they'd fight each other at full boost. So yeah, that's the end of this little story, which hopefully isn't too long and boring, and I will see you soon.